The morning she handed me Dad's old coffee mug, I knew something was off. It wasn't just the mug, it was the way Allison smiled wide, but hollow like a real estate agent, forced to sell a haunted house. There was a faint crack near the handle. I ran my thumb over it absently as she poured the coffee, her movements clipped and polished like always. That hairline fissure hadn't been there yesterday. I figured you'd want this, she said, placing the mug carefully in front of me. Dad's old favorite. I nodded, lifting it. The warmth seeped through the ceramic, but something about it felt wrong, like holding a lie disguised as a keepsake. She turned away quickly, pretending to busy herself with her laptop on the kitchen island. The screen reflected blue light onto her face, sharpening the corners. Her HOA newsletter sat curled beside it with a note scribbled in the margins. Final draft due tos include McPherson parcel. I sipped cautiously. The coffee was too bitter, the kind Dad would have never touched. He liked his light with a splash of milk, 2 sugars, and just a bit of cinnamon when Mom felt indulgent. This was black sharp, like her tone, so she began without looking up. Any idea how long you'll be staying? It was casual, too casual. I let the silence stretch. The mug's chip caught the light. She sighed, eyes still glued to her screen. I mean, just while we figure things out. Renovations are ongoing, I said, placing the mug down carefully, deliberately on the marble counter. And what exactly are we renovating, Allison, the house or our history? That got her to look up. Her eyes were tired but tight. Don't start. You know this isn't permanent. I didn't say it was. We sat in that silence, the kind only siblings can make, full of all the things we didn't say at Dad's funeral. Her blouse was crisp pearls at the neck. She always dressed like she was waiting for an interview that never came. I was in flannel hair, still damp from a shower, freshly unemployed and middle-aged, with nothing to prove, except maybe that I still mattered. The HOA guy walked past, outside, clipboard in hand, khakis spotless. He gave a 2-fingered wave through the window. Allison waved back too enthusiastically. Her eyes flicked to me. New regulations, she said. They're reevaluating lawn setbacks. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds urgent. She looked like she wanted to say something but didn't. Instead, she gathered her things. I have a call in 5. You'll be all right here. Sure, just me and Dad's ghost. She froze for half a second before exiting the kitchen. I heard her voice through the closed office door. It wasn't the work voice. It was lower, conspiratorial. No, I haven't told him yet. But if we don't move now, the files might be locked until he's declared incompetent. The trust needs a secondary signatory, yes, before Q4. I stood motionless, mug in hand. The word incompetent echoed. The clink of ceramic on quartz cut through the tension when I placed the mug down a bit too hard. It didn't break, but it echoed loud enough that she went silent. A beat passed. Then her voice resumed, cool, detached. That night, after she went to bed early with her chamomile and Kindle, I wandered through the den looking for my headphones. That's when I saw it. A beige folder half tucked under a stack of outdated Potomac bank statements. HOA Holdings Trust. Inside, a spreadsheet labeled Asset Division, Revised. My name had once been typed on the first page alongside Michael Green, Contingent Co-Trustee. It had been crossed out, neatly. No comment, no margin note. Just a deliberate black stroke. The attic groaned the way old houses do when they're trying to keep secrets. Maybe it was the rain, or maybe it was my own guilt thudding in my ears. But something about that morning felt expectant. The kind of stillness that waits to be disturbed. Allison had left early for an urgent HOA session, high heels clicking across the tile as she muttered about agendas and easements. Her perfume still lingered in the kitchen. I waited for the garage door to hush itself shut before slipping up the stairs, a flashlight and a coil of painter's tape in hand, my excuse. A supposed leak near the attic fan. She wouldn't check. The attic door resisted, swollen with age and a decade of disuse. When it finally yielded, dust spiraled like breath from a long-held sigh. It smelled like childhood cedar boxes, dry insulation, and something faintly metallic. The rain tapped lightly against the small window, rhythmic and steady. My knees creaked louder than the floorboards as I crawled toward the far wall, where uneven insulation suggested a clumsy patch. That's when I saw the handle. It was wedged behind yellow batting, a battered tin box, with masking tape across the top. Kensington Lot C, dispute. Hold it read in my father's distinct block letter handwriting. My stomach nodded. I hadn't seen that script since he signed my last birthday card, before the confusion began. Before the care facility, before Allison took over. The lock was rusted but brittle. One firm twist with a screwdriver popped it open. Inside, old blueprints, creased, annotated, some still smudged with graphite. One map caught my eye. It bore the same layout as the one on Allison's HOA newsletter, but where her version showed Lot C as marked for rezoning, Dad's blueprint had bold red ink scrawled across it, claim denied. Fraudulent submission. Not final. Tucked beneath the papers was an envelope the type lawyers use. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the contents. A preliminary draft of a land trust. HOA Holdings Trust. It read at the top. Below, in cleaner, more recent ink, trustees: Robert Halpern, Allison C. Halpern, Michael J. Halpern. My name, not as a footnote, as an equal. The date 3 months before Dad's first hospital visit, before his short-term memory started eating itself. I sat back on my heels, breathing in damp insulation and stale betrayal. This wasn't just old paperwork. This was a narrative my sister had carefully rewritten, and I just stumbled onto the first draft. The box made a dull thunk as I rested it beside me. I pulled out an old invoice, necks water-stained, curled at the corners. Kensington Reclamation Soil Test Claim. Rejected, stamped in faded red. Dad's pen had carved across it. Denied, false claim, flagged by county assessor. Ink blotches pooled where rain must have seeped through one winter. This wasn't negligence. This was resistance. I heard the faint buzz of my phone vibrating downstairs. Ignored it. Let it hum like a reminder that real time still ticked below me. A gust of wind made the attic window shudder. I tightened my grip on the envelope. I'd only meant to fix a leak. But I'd found a fault line. Later that day, over reheated soup and silence, Allison barely looked up from her laptop. She mentioned expanding the driveway for better property valuation. Her eyes didn't meet mine. "You remember Lot C?" I asked too casually. She blinked once, then resumed typing. Dad always exaggerated about that. It was settled. I stirred the soup slowly. Funny, he labeled it fraudulent claim in his notes. This time she froze, but only for a breath. "Michael," she said with soft warning, "you shouldn't dig too deep into things you don't understand." I nodded as if conceding, but my mind was already outlining the map. The annotations, the trust with my name still intact. That night, I went back to the box. I couldn't sleep. Rain had thickened, tapping harder now. I laid the maps out on the guest bed edges, overlapping like puzzle pieces. In the yellowed margins, Dad had scribbled thoughts. What would Ben say, and check land deed from 1993. Ben. The name circled my brain like a moth. I hadn't heard it in years. A mentor, I thought, someone from Dad's city planning days. A text pinged just then. From his care nurse, "Your dad's lucid today. Keeps asking for Ben. Said he needs to talk to Michael. Soon." I looked back at the blueprint box, then at my reflection in the rain-slicked window. I wasn't supposed to find any of this, but maybe the attic hadn't liked being ignored. Ben showed up wearing the same coat he wore at Dad's retirement. Still smelled like pipe smoke. I spotted him through the fogged window of the old diner, hunched in a corner booth like time had curled him inward. His face lit up when he saw me, but not enough to hide the caution behind his eyes. It was still raining, thin, persistent streaks tapping the awning above the entrance. I pushed the door open, letting in a gust of autumn chill and the faint jingle of the bell above the frame. Inside, everything was as I remembered: red leather booths faded to orange ceiling fans that spun out of obligation, and that ever-present smell of bacon grease clinging to the air like it had nowhere else to go. Ben waved me over. He had already ordered coffee black and slid a cup toward me as I sat down. The mug had a hairline crack running down one side. I couldn't help the flicker in my chest. Another crack, another symbol. "Still take it black?" he asked, voice gravelly but not unfriendly. "Still do," I replied. I didn't ask how he remembered. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded napkin, setting it beside my cup like it was something sacred. 2 words were written in thick pen: trust revoked. I stared at it, then back at him. That's Dad's handwriting. Ben nodded. I found it a few weeks ago, bottom of his old desk. Thought maybe it was nothing, but now. The word lingered in the steam between us. I tried logging into the trust server yesterday, I said. Allison beat me to it. Ben didn't flinch. Figures. We sat for a moment, letting the silence settle in like dust on a blueprint. Outside, a delivery truck splashed through the puddles on Route 50. So tell me, I said, why now? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the scratched Formica table. Because I've seen this kind of thing before. The moment your father started to slip, just the first signs, Allison was ready. She filed the paperwork for power of attorney before anyone could ask questions. She used that leverage to freeze accounts, transfer oversight, even tamper with documents your father hadn't reviewed yet. I felt the heat rising in my throat. And no one stopped her. She made it look like it was to protect him, Ben said softly. And by the time anyone noticed, she'd locked the gates. I reached for the napkin again. Why write this and not file it? Ben sighed, looking out the window like he might see a younger version of himself walking by. Your father didn't want a war. He thought maybe she'd come to her senses. But he left the trail, Michael. He always left trails. A waitress came by, refilled our cups, and left without a word. Ben wrapped both hands around his mug, like he was anchoring himself to something steady. Do you remember Lot C? I asked. He looked up. The Kensington dispute, I nodded. Of course I remember. Your dad fought that rezoning proposal for months, said it violated easement boundaries and was a blatant land grab, masked as community development. Allison said he dropped it. Ben let out a bitter chuckle. He didn't drop it. He got silenced. I reached into my coat pocket and slid the folded printout I had brought with me. Ben's eyes scanned the title, Revocation of Trustee Rights Draft. It was dated 6 months before Dad's condition deteriorated. She never filed it, I said. But she knew, Ben repeated, nodding slowly. She's using me, I whispered, as if saying it aloud would solidify its truth. My name's still on some of the old drafts. She blocked a deed transfer using that clause, tied up the HOA land approvals in court, citing me as a stakeholder. Ben's jaw tightened. Then you're the hole in her plan. The words sat like a nail on glass. Just then my phone buzzed. I pulled it out under the table, hoping for a mundane email or weather alert. It was neither. Allison just logged into the family trust server, I muttered. She's active now. Ben's eyebrows arched. Then she's nervous. I looked back at the napkin still sitting between us. Time to make her more than nervous, I said. Ben didn't smile, but I saw the spark in his eyes, the old fight reignited just slightly. Outside, the rain had picked up, drumming harder against the diner's windows. Inside, everything was still: the scent of coffee, the scratch of jazz on old speakers, and a quiet resolve hanging between 2 men who knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The fluorescent lights at the county records office had always made my head ache. That mix of flickering tubes and decades-old linoleum gave the whole place a hospital for paperwork feel. I'd spent the better part of the morning cradling Dad's old mug coffee, long gone cold, without realizing I'd brought it from the kitchen counter straight into a government building. Some habits don't ask for permission. The mug still had that thin crack under the handle, a fault line. Just like us, I handed my ID to the front clerk, a woman with a nose ring and the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd seen more lies than files. I'm looking for records from 2003. HOA development petitions. Kensington Lot C, she blinked. That was almost 20 years ago, I'm aware, I said. I think there's a misfile, or maybe a redacted entry that shouldn't be. She pulled up the digital archive, typing slow, like each key owed her rent. Anything specific? I pulled out Ben's napkin from my folder, crumpled but still legible. Then I passed over a faded email I'd printed from Dad's archive. They tried to bury Lot C. Tell Mike to check the settlement ledger. D. She squinted. You're Michael Langford. Still am. The screen flickered. There's a sealed folder here. I can't grant access without supervisor approval. Can you get them? She sighed. He's at lunch. I leaned on the counter, eyes catching on the HOA seal, faintly embossed on the corner of a manila folder in the pending copy bin. It wasn't just misfiled, it was still active, still hiding. Let me guess, I said quietly. This is the same case from '03 again, isn't it? She stopped mid-keystroke. Her tone changed. You know it's funny. You're not the first brother she's tried to erase. What? She didn't elaborate, just handed me a new visitor badge and whispered basement file room. But take the elevator. Third drawer from the left taped red tab. The elevator creaked like it hadn't moved since the '90s. My footsteps echoed down the narrow corridor of the record sublevel, each step coated in a smell of wet paper and mildew. Drawer 3 was jammed. I pulled harder than I should have, and it groaned open, revealing a folder marked 2004, Confidential Settlement, Kensington Lot C. The edges were curled, the paper brittle, and the inside was damning. There it was, a quiet settlement payout between the HOA and an unlisted recipient authorized by Allison herself. She'd buried it deep. The signature was digital, but I recognized the timestamp. It was days after Dad's first hospital visit. She must have moved quickly, knowing no one else would catch it. My grip tightened. The mug still in my other hand slipped from my fingers and hit the cold granite floor. The clink echoed. I froze. The handle had cracked clean off this time. That sound. It brought the clerk downstairs. She looked down at the shattered mug, then back up at me. You okay? I held up the folder. Did anyone else ever pull this? She paused. That folder's only been out once, last year, by Allison Langford. Ben called later that day. His voice was lower than usual. Michael, I don't want to alarm you, but someone broke into my car last night. What they didn't take my phone, not my laptop, just the Kensington binder, the one I said I'd show you next week. My stomach tightened. You think it's Allison? I think someone doesn't want you putting the pieces together. I looked down at the broken mug on my passenger seat. The jagged handle rested in my palm, like a warning. This is bigger than just land, Ben said, and she's been planning it longer than you think. Ben never used email. He didn't trust it. He barely trusted landlines and once told me he still pays his utility bills in person because someone's got to look a man in the eye before handing over $30 for water. So when I saw the envelope tucked under my windshield wiper, rain-dampened but sealed in a plastic sleeve, I knew it could only be from him. In red pen scrawled in jittery all-caps handwriting across the front, "Do not delay." I stood there in the Veterans Memorial parking lot, the chill of the morning biting through my sleeves, fallen maple leaves clinging to my shoes and windshield. It hadn't rained hard last night, just enough to gloss everything in a sheen that made it all look like the past was freshly lacquered. I slid into the driver's seat, tore open the envelope, and laid its contents across the dashboard. First a folded map, familiar in texture and ink, Dad's annotations in pencil, along the Kensington subdivision perimeter. Lot C was circled in blue, then again in red more aggressively. In the margins, silent sale attempt Allison's firm, who signed authorization, not me. And below it a date I recognized, the week he slipped and fractured his hip. The week everything in his life began to blur. Second meeting minutes from an HOA land use session dated October 2020. I scanned the list of attendees. My sister wasn't named directly, but a firm listed as McGrath Planning Consultants had logged 5 votes by proxy. I knew she did freelance for them. What I didn't know until now was that the firm had lobbied for a rezoning bid that directly benefited the parcel adjacent to our family's trust. Third and I didn't realize my breath had stopped until this moment, a letter, my father's letter. Handwritten, dated 2 years ago, Michael. If you're reading this, she's done it. I want to believe it was an accident, that she didn't mean to overwrite the work we built. But if this letter finds you, it means the opposite. Enclosed is my affidavit naming you successor trustee. It was notarized and witnessed. Ben and Evelyn were there. We filed it with the clerk's office. Or at least I thought we did. If it's missing, someone pulled it. And there's only one person who had the access to do that. My hands were shaking, not from the cold. From something deeper, a tectonic shift that started in my gut and rose slowly to the base of my skull. The letter continued. This community was your mother's dream. She imagined parks, walkable sidewalks, homes where People waved to each other. Not condos, not chain stores. Fight for it, Michael. Not with fists, not with noise, with facts, with dignity. The blueprint box holds more than maps. It holds her. I blinked hard. My father was never poetic, not even with Mom. But grief had rewritten him, the same way his injury had redrafted our lives. I reached the final page, a notarized affidavit naming me sole trustee. The seal was intact, but a note in Ben's pen said, "Never entered in record." Clerk at Fairfax lost it, lost, or removed. I sat there for a while, the heat from the defroster fogging the inside of the windshield. I read the letter again, then a third time. By the fourth, I started underlining. My own pen was trembling, but steadying with each mark I made. The lines weren't just information. They were war drums. Then I heard it, a soft click. Not from my car, from somewhere outside. Another click, a pause, then a third. I turned my head slowly. Across the lot, a black sedan sat idling 3 rows back. No plates I could see. The passenger window cracked just enough to reveal the glint of a long lens camera. Another click. I stuffed the letter and affidavit back into the manila envelope, slipped it under my coat, and started the car. By the time I turned to check again, the sedan was gone. But the feeling wasn't. I asked for public records. They handed me a police escort. It wasn't my first time walking into the county auditor's office, but it felt different now. Maybe it was the way the holiday banners drooped like guilty flags, or the hum of fluorescent lights overhead that seemed too loud, too constant. Or maybe it was the man in uniform who followed me through the metal detector and didn't bother to pretend he wasn't watching me. "Standard protocol," he muttered when I asked. "Request flagged for sensitive content." I clutched the black binder marked Annex C, the one I'd found in Dad's garage, hidden behind a false panel in the old cabinet. My fingers stuck to the vinyl cover. Rain had started again and the chill hadn't left my skin since I stepped out of the car. Ms. Harding sat behind a fortress of file trays and half-dead succulents glasses perched at the end of her nose, like they might jump off from bureaucratic exhaustion. She didn't look up when she said, "You're the architect brother, right? The one from the trust." "Yes," I said. "Michael Stafford." I emailed ahead. Her fingers paused mid-click on the keyboard. "You brought documentation?" I opened the binder and slid out a manila folder thinner, now that most of it had been scanned and archived. Inside, the notarized affidavit from Dad, naming me successor trustee, stamped but never filed. HOA filings with timestamps altered. 3 copies of a development contract, all listing different LLCs, all signed by one person, Allison D. Stafford. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Ms. Harding finally looked up. Her eyes scanned the documents with mechanical precision. Page after page, her brows furrowed lower until one paper stopped her cold. A 2019 deed transfer for Lot C, filed with Dad's signature, dated 3 weeks after the neurologist had noted severe cognitive decline. Next to it, a scanned email from Allison's firm discussing expedited legal mechanisms via durable POA. "You're saying she did this while he was unfit to sign?" I nodded. "And that she used my name to delay transfer to a conservation trust." I found my name crossed out in the original. The sheriff's deputy shifted behind me. Ms. Harding leaned back slowly. Her office had no windows, but she looked toward the wall like she could see through it. "We have procedures for this," she said. "But they take time. Politics jurisdiction. You understand." "I understand delay favors the guilty," I replied. She exhaled. "Wait here." She disappeared behind the door marked Internal Ethics Review. When she returned 20 minutes later, she was holding another binder thicker than mine. She dropped it on the table with a thud. On its spine, HOA Stafford Kensington Consortium, 2004-2022. She opened to a flagged page. "Here's where it gets interesting," she said. "Your sister's name doesn't just appear once or twice. She's listed as a managing partner for 3 separate shell companies, used to bid on the same parcel across multiple years. That's creative." "Or illegal," I said. Ms. Harding didn't disagree. "And you've seen this before?" I asked. "With other developers." She hesitated. It's the same case from '03 again, isn't it? Her words hit like a dropped stone. I remembered the bailiff whispering the same thing back in Chapter 4. My father had spent years fighting against the original Kensington zoning manipulation. He had won barely, but someone had learned from that loss, and now it was back buried in paperwork cloaked in triplicate lies. Micro-climax came not with shouting, but with silence. Ms. Harding closed the binder. "We'll open an ethics inquiry," she said. "Off the record for now, I'll need digital copies. Originals stay with us." I stood letting the chair legs scrape slowly across the floor. "Thank you." She didn't smile. "Be careful, Mr. Stafford. This isn't just zoning anymore. There's money here. And people who think a clean name can be bought." As I walked out, the sheriff's deputy kept pace beside me. "You got guts," he said. "Most people stop at red tape." "Red tape doesn't scare me," I replied. "Silence does." We reached the exit. The air outside was colder now. Fog drifted along the ground like spilled ink. My phone buzzed. "Ben," I answered. "Did they take the envelope?" "No." "But Allison filed something else," he said, voice gravelly. "Emergency injunction against you. Claims you're harassing a vulnerable elder. Says you're a danger to Dad." I stopped walking. "She's trying to paint you as the threat," he continued. "And you've got less than 72 hours before it's heard in circuit court." I hung up slowly and looked down at the black binder still in my hands. For a moment it felt heavier than it should. Or maybe I was just starting to carry it like Dad once did. She didn't come, but her lawyer did. The first thing I noticed was the cranberry sauce. It had dripped onto the envelope and spread like blood across the cream-colored paper. I didn't even know who brought cranberry sauce to this place. It tasted like tin and memory. But there it was, seeping into the thick fiber of the legal threat, giving it a shade more honest than the ink it was printed in. Thanksgiving at Pine Hollow Assisted Living was always quiet, but this year felt colder. Cardboard turkeys hung unevenly from the ceiling, some listing to one side, as if they'd finally given up pretending to be cheerful. The fluorescent lights above flickered in half-second intervals. A loop of soft jazz played over the intercom, half-hearted and out of place. I looked around the dining hall. Dozens of slow-moving residents in cardigans and wheeled walkers shuffled toward plastic cafeteria trays. There was a light buzz of conversation, mostly names being repeated 3 times and forgotten again. A woman wearing a paper pilgrim hat asked me if I was the electrician. "Michael," my mom said suddenly, her voice cutting through the fog like a childhood bell. "Is that you?" I turned to see her sitting alone at a long table, a plate of turkey untouched before her. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong, but her hair was combed. Someone had taken care with her appearance, and it wasn't Allison. "I thought you weren't coming this year," she said. "They said—" "Your sister—" Her voice trailed off. She looked past me. I took a deep breath and sat down beside her. "I wouldn't miss it, Mom." She blinked slowly, then looked around. "Where's your father?" I paused. "You remember he passed, right?" She frowned. "He did," then softer to herself. "When did that happen?" I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the cracked ceramic mug from the diner, now clean but still fractured along the handle. I placed it gently on the table between us. She stared at it. "He used to drink from that, every morning. Always said the coffee tasted better in that one, I remember." A man in a sharp charcoal suit walked toward us. Polished shoes, briefcase in one hand, and that look lawyers get when they walk into rooms filled with people who can't fight back. He didn't introduce himself right away, just placed the cranberry-stained envelope on the table between us. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, nodding formally. "I represent Miss Allison Whitaker. This is a formal cease and desist. You are to refrain from any further inquiries regarding the Kensington Trust, the HOA land transfers, or any matters pending legal clarification. Continued actions may result in civil liabilities." My mother looked at the envelope, then back at him. Are you a friend of Michael's?" I opened the envelope, read every word. It was boilerplate intimidation, half threat, half theater. But it was signed in blue ink and delivered on a holiday. That meant something. That meant they were scared. I placed the pages back inside, folded the flap, and looked him in the eye. No, I'm not signing anything. Not today. Not ever." He straightened his tie. "This isn't a negotiation, Mr. Whitaker. It's Thanksgiving," I said. "Go home." He didn't move. Mom shifted slightly. "Why did your sister take Daddy's chair?" The room went quiet. Not immediately, but in that slow domino way that noise recedes when truth enters. The lawyer opened his mouth, then shut it again. Maybe he hadn't expected the old woman at the table to speak. Maybe he hadn't thought she'd notice that the seat beside her dad's seat, always at the head, was empty. "She said it wasn't yours anymore," my mom continued. "Said you didn't want it, but I knew that wasn't true. You were always the one who stayed." I felt my throat tighten. My hands began to shake, but I kept them under the table. "She didn't even ask," Mom whispered. I reached for my phone, scrolled until I found the old voicemail I had saved. Her voice crackled through the tiny speakers, soft and worn. "Michael, you were always the one who stayed. Your father trusted you, not her. Don't let her take it from you." No one moved. The jazz had stopped playing. Somewhere near the window, a fork fell off a tray and clattered loudly. Then a slow clap. Just one. Then another and another. A man 2 tables over, a Korean War veteran named Pete. I think nodded once. "About time someone said it out loud," he muttered. A nurse frowned but said nothing. The lawyer gathered his envelope and backed away. "This isn't over." I looked around the room and felt something shift. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was yelling into a void. These people remembered my father. They remembered the integrity he brought to the community before it was bartered away by HOA votes and silent LLCs. As I rose to leave, one of the staff members, Janice, the one with the silver braid and hands that always smelled faintly of lemon balm, slipped something into my coat pocket. A folded note, handwritten. "We remember what your dad built. We're with you." I walked out into the hallway and paused by the coat rack. I didn't put the mug away. I held it in my hand like a talisman. The parking lot outside was glazed in frost. My breath hung in the air as I stepped into the cold. Somewhere behind me, inside that flickering dining hall, the past had begun to speak. And for the first time, people were listening. When I handed the judge the cracked mug, it didn't break. Neither did I. Courtroom 6B smelled like old varnish and colder truths. Dusty beams of December sunlight cut through the room in angles so sharp they felt judicial in themselves. Flags at half-staff, outside the tall windows, fluttered silently, as if observing a solemn rite. On the docket, buried under a foreclosure dispute, and a zoning appeal was mine. In re the restoration of Michael Thompson as trustee of the Kensington Family Trust. I carried no briefcase, just a cardboard banker's box and Dad's mug, its handle still glued after its second crack at the county records office. I stood taller than I had in weeks. Not because I had more to say, though I did, but because the weight I carried now had structure, a timeline, a story, a shape the law could recognize. Across the aisle sat Allison. She wore her courtroom suit, navy-tailored, expensive. Her lips were the shade of a cease and desist letter, and her expression, as always, was unreadable to anyone who hadn't grown up with it. But I had. I could tell from the twitch in her jaw that she was cornered, or rather that she knew the walls were closing. Judge Wilmer adjusted his glasses. "Let's begin." I stepped forward, hands steady, and placed the cracked mug gently on the witness stand's ledge. "This belonged to my father," I began, voice low but firm. "He drank from it the morning he signed a document revoking Allison's trustee rights. That document," I lifted the notarized affidavit from the box, "was never filed." The judge nodded. "Go on." I unfolded a printed timeline, HOA filings trust. Communications deed transfers. One by one, I placed them on the table, walking through each year like exhuming the bones of a buried truth. I highlighted the overlapping signatures, Allison's name appearing on contracts under different LLCs, each one rerouting ownership of community land into the hands of shell entities tied to her firm. Then came the letter, the one Dad had written in 2020 and entrusted to Ben. "If you're reading this," she's done it, the first line read. I let the judge read that one himself. Allison stood. "Your Honor, acted to protect the family assets during a period of mental decline. My father's, and as we see now, perhaps my brother's." There it was, her final strategy reframed concern as instability. but Judge Wilmer didn't blink. He tapped a pen once, twice. Thompson, the court is in possession of time-stamped documents indicating deliberate obfuscation of land ownership, failure to disclose conflicts of interest, and unauthorized use of power of attorney post-diagnosis. Allison's fingers curled slightly at her side. In my view, the judge continued, Mr. Michael Thompson was the intended successor, not merely in paper, but in principle. He reached for the mug, held it for a moment. Sometimes the object that survives the cracks tells us the most about what was whole. A long silence. Then this court restores Mr. Michael Thompson as the rightful trustee of the Kensington Family Trust. All rezoning contracts under dispute are hereby voided. This case is referred to the District Attorney's Office for further review. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and relief. Outside, the wind was crisp and unapologetic. I descended the courthouse steps slowly, the mug wrapped in a cloth inside my box. A small crowd had gathered at the bottom residence of Kensington Hills. Most I didn't recognize by name, only by porch light or lawn pattern. But each one held something familiar, a blueprint, a wooden bench plaque, a faded photograph. All pieces of the community my father helped build. One woman stepped forward holding a child's drawing of a gazebo. Your dad said this would be the heart of the neighborhood, she whispered. It still is. Another man, army jacket, oxygen tank badge on his chest, nodded toward my box. You held it together, he said, even when no one else did. And I did. Not just the mug, the trust, the story, the name. Later at the hospital, I stood beside Ben's bed. Machines beeped quietly. He was awake but too tired to talk much. I placed the radio on the table. They were replaying the courthouse segment from local news. When the anchor said my name, Ben smiled weakly. Told you, he murmured. The napkin never lies. He dozed off with the faint jazz of the diner playing in the background and the late sun casting gold across his blanket. I sat there a long time, letting the quiet settle. No more secrets, no more fragments, just the mug, and it held.